What is culture? This is a difficult question. Culture is a complex phenomenon that seems to elude all definitions. How do you categorize it? The term culture has included TV wrestling, classical music, black death metal, literature, movies, TV, traditional tribal dances. It's very broad. Global culture is a multi-billion-dollar industry, so there's obviously a lot of interest there. Some people seem to be born with this inherent drive to create. Why is this? A particularly interesting trait of culture is that it doesn't always portray the world in an accurate manner. Many times it portrays a fiction or near fiction, and we find this attractive. Because the role of culture in society is less clear than other social mechanisms such as physics or engineering, it can sometimes be ignored or underappreciated, and I believe this is dangerous. Based on the fictional component, I'm going to use a loose definition of culture as the subconsciousness of society. Just as psychologists analyze how dreams reflect one person's view of reality, I think that culture sort of displays a societal understanding of the way things are. For example, an individual's nightmare is often based off a traumatic experience or a perceived threat. So, by extension, if horror films are the nightmares of the societal subconscious, we can see that many of the major villains have been victims of traumatic abuse, while other films use abject figures or aliens to threaten society's preconceived ideas about the nature of reality. Using the definition of culture as the societal subconscious, I want to show that it has two main functions, although I admit there are probably others. The first and perhaps most obvious function is that of enjoyment. Culture offers us moments of levity in lives which can sometimes be burdensome. It can stimulate us by showing us something new, or it can give us a sense of comfort by revisiting a familiar idea. Moreover, the fictional component allows us to daydream and live vicariously through iconic cultural figures. A man with an unsatisfactory sexual life can gain a sense of triumph when he watches James Bond seduce his newest conquest. Similarly, a woman in a heterosexual monogamous culture who is in a failed relationship can fantasize that Richard Gere will come and save her, and this gives her a sense of comfort as well. These cultural figures give us a sense of control over our ultimately uncontrollable lives, and this leads to the second function of culture, that of identity formation. There can be little doubt that culture influences our perspective of life. It's not always a 1984 propagandist mind control type of influence. It's usually slow and cumulative, and this makes it very difficult to measure its effects properly. For example, young guys tend to like action movies. Let's say they watch an average of 4 action movies a month, and in each movie, let's say an average of 10 bad guys die. That means in 1 year they see 480 people die in movies, and over a space of 10 years they see almost 5,000 people die, whereas in reality, they don't have this proximity to death. This blurred culture gives them a skewed perspective of reality. And like I said, it's difficult to measure the effects of culture accurately, but I really think that these movies have an influence on guys. Many of them have these violent fantasies. They want to beat up the bad guys and be the heroes. Perhaps a better documented example of how culture affects identity is that of female body image. In North America, it seems that almost every aspect of culture portrays a woman as a sexually glamorized supermodel figure. Comic book characters, TV wrestling, movies, video games, dramas. It just keeps getting repeated over and over. And it's been documented that after watching these cultural examples, girls tend to model behavioral problems such as anorexia and bulimia. So, what is good culture? Well, after looking at a lot of different definitions, I think the jazz artist Duke Ellington says it best. If it sounds good, it is good. Some people will say that Mozart is the greatest musician of all time. Others are going to say it's Jimi Hendrix. Others are going to say it's the Beatles. Others are going to say that it's Marilyn Manson. Who is right? This is the wrong way of thinking about things. I would say that the definition of good culture is that it gives your identity what you need at that particular time. If you're a toddler and you like watching Sesame Street, that's awesome because it's a great show. If you're a teenager and you're angry at your parents, then you have to listen to some Metallica or some Pantera or something. If you're a 10-year-old girl and you want to be bubbly and dancy, then you have to listen to the Spice Girls or Britney Spears or whatever they're playing today. I'm sorry, I'm a bit out of the loop. But I will say that the more diverse a culture is, the more possible identities a person can choose from. If the only characters available for us to identify with are action figures or supermodels, then we will have a very limited perspective about the world. But if you have a wider range of cultural figures to choose from, you will have a broader perspective of life and you will become a healthier person, I think. It would be really cool if you can like Metallica and Britney Spears and SpongeBob SquarePants and Spider-Man and Japanese animation. If you can hold all those things together, you can see the world from a much larger perspective. So if the definition of culture is the societal subconscious, and its main functions are entertainment and identity formation, then I believe it is the responsibility of cultural purveyors to proliferate and diversify. Previously, good culture was viewed as this sort of ethereal sublime, something that was close to God, so that when you read Shakespeare, you got a sense of elation and superiority, your soul was lifted. This method of thinking was called formalism, and it was challenged because certain people got to choose what high culture was, like a sort of elite priest cult. This criticism gained momentum after World War II, when Western society really began to question itself. Currently, postmodernism and other similar theories are very popular in the academic communities, but they come with their own problems. While they were effective in destroying formalism and opening our societies to other forms of culture, they really haven't left anything in its place. With axioms such as there is no truth, they've left little room for cultural theorists to have a positive effect on society. They are so intent on attacking authority figures that they refuse the obligations and responsibilities that an authority figure in this field could have. Having said this, I'd like to admit that my knowledge of postmodernism needs improvement, but let me offer an alternative approach. I believe that culture should proliferate and diversify so that society as a whole can view the world from many perspectives. I think that the role of cultural theorists should be to identify repeating patterns, sites which refuse to diversify for secondary reasons. When cultural images repeat, it's because society is refusing to grow and move in a new direction, and this is very harmful. Let's look at some perpetuated images. Why are Mexicans frequently displayed as stupid? Why are black guys frequently killed in horror movies? Why are sex workers frequently displayed as disposable? Why is the quarterback always the hero? Why do the Americans always win? Why are many protagonists orphans? And why do so many action heroes lose their girlfriends? I think that a new wave of cultural theory could couple itself with sociology and look at what particular groups like watching these images over and over again. Once they find a psycho-sociological cultural diagnosis as to why these groups like watching these images over and over again, they can find a suitable alternative image which allows the culture to evolve in a better direction. And while postmodernists might criticize these new cultural theories for being authority figures, I think that with responsibility, they can direct culture in a way that is not overly diversified, or else things will become chaotic, or is too conservative. Like many things in life, it should be balanced. Culture is an organism. It evolves, it changes, it moves in different directions. And I think it's important to recognize the element of truth in the fiction. What do these symbols mean? Why are people attracted to them? And what does it mean for society as a whole? Anyways, thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any thoughts or feedback, please let me know. I'm very curious.